In the Resident Evil universe, few creations stand out as much as the G virus, also known as the Golgotha virus. Introduced as one of Umbrella Corporation's greatest and most disastrous experiments, the G virus symbolizes the saga's fascination with the intersection between science and horror. This creation is a retrovirus that pushes mutation to the extreme, transforming those infected into abominations of flesh, hunger, and continuous evolution. However, its story is not limited to displaying monsters. It also delves into ambition, betrayal, tragedy, and the desperate hope of a handful of survivors. In this video, we shall explore how the G virus was discovered and developed, the people who played pivotal roles in its creation, and the unfortunate souls who fell victim to it. We shall also analyze how these events shaped the Resident Evil universe as a whole, from G's first appearance to its subsequent use by bioterrorist groups. The G virus was based on prior research involving the progenitor virus. The progenitor was discovered decades before the game's main events in a cave in Africa and served as the catalyst for countless Umbrella experiments. From that primary virus emerged the better-known T virus, which created zombies and various bioorganic weapons. Yet Umbrella's scientists always aimed for something greater. One of them, Dr. William Birkin, led the search for new lines of inquiry after recognizing the limitations of the T virus. But how exactly did that research evolve into G? First, one must consider Lisa Trevor, a victim who had been held captive by Umbrella for years in the Arklay Mountains. Lisa underwent numerous experiments and injections, some involving progenitor strains, others featuring early T virus prototypes. During one such experiment, a parasite meant to heighten her mutation was inexplicably destroyed by Lisa's own immune system. What amazed the scientists was that her body appeared to incorporate fragments of the parasite into her DNA, showing an extraordinary form of viral adaptation. Dr. William Birkin, who witnessed this unsettling phenomenon, realized that something new had appeared within Lisa Trevor's body, an unknown strain derived from progenitor. In 1988, he isolated and extracted this virus, calling it the G virus. While progenitor and T sometimes produced stable mutants and other times proved lethal, G revealed an unprecedented ability to regenerate tissue and trigger mutations far beyond what had been seen before. From that moment on, G became Umbrella's next major project, nicknamed Golgotha. The company's directors, especially Oswald Spencer, perceived in it enormous potential for eugenics and for the next generation of bioorganic weapons. Although the G virus was intended to be refined into a controllable weapon, just as the T virus had been used to create tyrants, its regenerative capacity proved extraordinarily difficult to harness. This new virus could heal, resurrect, and even bring corpses back to life. Yet it also caused such extreme mutations that the test subjects ceased to resemble human beings. Even so, Umbrella's corporate machine pressed on. The research was moved from the Arklay Mountains laboratory to Raccoon City's new underground facility, known as Nest, where Birkin and his wife Annette took charge. Thus began the G virus project, discreetly funded by one of the world's most infamous and powerful pharmaceutical companies, Umbrella. To grasp why the G virus became such a monstrous threat, one must look at Dr. William Birkin himself. A genuine child prodigy who earned his doctorate in his teens, Birkin joined Umbrella at around the same time as another notable figure of the saga, Dr. Albert Wesker. Initially, they shared a friendly rivalry, although over time their ambitions led them down separate paths. Whilst Wesker immersed himself in intelligence and covert operations, Birkin stayed in laboratory research, working closely with James Marcus and eventually taking charge of T-virus development. In short order, Birkin identified the new G strain in Lisa Trevor's body, seizing the opportunity to overshadow anyone else in Umbrella. However, Umbrella's very nature guaranteed internal strife. Birkin believed he deserved an executive position, once he had perfected the G virus. But on realizing that the corporation's higher-ups had other plans for G and would probably cut him out or force him off the project, he grew paranoid and distrustful. By 1998, tension was suffocating. After nearly a decade of work on the G virus, Birkin hoped to unveil it as Umbrella's greatest advance. Instead, he encountered mistrust and increasing signs that Umbrella's headquarters intended to take the virus from him at any cost. That pressure drove Birkin to secretly negotiate with the United States military. If Umbrella would not reward him, perhaps the American armed forces would. Thus, Birkin's ambition sowed the seeds of his own ruin. The G virus was at the center of it all. If Umbrella even suspected Birkin planned to flee with their most prized secret, they would respond with force. That is precisely what happened. In September 1998, an Umbrella Security Service team was dispatched to recover the G virus and, if necessary, neutralize Birkin. The consequences of that operation would prove catastrophic, not just for Birkin, but for the entire city. By late September 1998, Birkin was deeply invested in his work at Nest. Desperate, he was about to hand over the G virus to American operatives. However, Umbrella's intelligence network uncovered his betrayal and deployed its security service. Cornered in his laboratory, Birkin refused to surrender the virus willingly, and the operatives shot him. During that brutal assault, they nearly seized every G virus sample Birkin carried until he, gravely wounded and determined that Umbrella would not steal the work of his life, injected himself with the sole remaining sample. That desperate act saved his life, but cost him his humanity. Mere minutes after the team departed with several vials of G&T, the dying Birkin became the first recorded G mutant, a being of immense strength, driven by revenge and a primal need to reproduce its genetic load. This creature hunted down and wiped out the USS team in the sewers, destroying most of the stolen vials and allowing the T-virus to leak into Raccoon City's water supply via rats that drank from the spilled contents. Within a matter of days, the city was transformed into a nightmare of zombies, lickers, and bioorganic weapons. Birkin, in his mutated form, continued roaming the labs and sewers, driven by G's fundamental urge to seek compatible hosts, particularly those sharing his genetic lineage. This tragic incident introduced the G virus to the wider world. While the T virus rampaged through the city, G also found fresh victims. Some corpses, if exposed appropriately, reanimated as G zombies, whilst Birkin specifically sought out his daughter Sherry to implant a G embryo in her. At one point, he did manage to implant the parasite in his own daughter, though she was rescued and cured soon afterwards. Ultimately, this brilliant scientist succumbed to the unstoppable power of his own creation, dying beneath Raccoon City in a final explosion that wiped out his ultimate form. Speaking of form, the G virus appears to mutate its host through multiple stages. In Birkin's case, he underwent a sequence of drastic mutations, each more extreme than the last. Initially, he retained a flicker of rational thought, but as the virus rewrote both body and mind, he lost all sense of humanity. In the G1 phase, Birkin's body begins to suffer an alarming physical distortion. Whilst his left side retains some semblance of recognizable form, his right side is twisted into a grotesque mass of muscle, bone, and a large functioning eye, owing to the fact that Birkin injected the virus there. This tumor-like structure appears to develop a rudimentary consciousness and takes over his right arm, forcing Birkin to fight for control over his own body. Although he can occasionally suppress the intruding impulses, his grip on sanity and autonomy begins to slip. In the G2 phase, Birkin has nearly lost all capacity for self-control. His torso and limbs swell dramatically, granting him immense strength and agility, but erasing any last shred of his human appearance. New growths arise around his chest, and arm-like protrusions emerge from his midsection, signaling that the G virus is aggressively reconfiguring Birkin's genetic code. His original head is relegated to a lower position, overshadowed by a new dominant head and an altered skeletal structure. Although Birkin's consciousness may briefly surface, the G2 form acts almost purely on instinct. In the G3 phase, Birkin is a hideous monster, virtually devoid of external human features. His body is riddled with numerous eyes, claws, and exposed tissue. His original face is buried under warped flesh near his rib cage, a final visible echo of who he once was. This stage is brutal, driven purely by animal instincts, and seems capable of a limited tactical sense, suggesting that the virus adjusts Birkin's biology to ensure G's survival and reproduction, rather than preserving his mind. In the G4 stage, the virus warps and reabsorbs limbs in bizarre ways, further unbalancing Birkin's frame. What previously seemed a progression towards a humanoid form becomes something more chaotic. Bony plates form to shield his new eyes, and certain limbs turn vestigial or shift their position. The G4 phase's purpose is swift adaptation to injury. Each serious wound triggers another mutation, emphasizing that the G virus favors survival above any stable biological structure. By now, Birkin's original personality has vanished entirely, replaced by an entity that continues to mutate in response to external threats. In his final stage, G5, Birkin degenerates into an enormous amorphous mass of pulsating muscle, bone, and a ravenous central maw. All human characteristics are lost beneath a throbbing conglomeration of organic matter. Though still monstrously strong and capable of targeting its enemies, this shape is more akin to an uncontainable cancer than a discrete being. The virus runs wild, no longer conforming to any human anatomy. Ultimately, this ghastly form is destroyed, demonstrating that injecting himself with G merely prolonged Birkin's suffering and hastened Raccoon City's downfall. Beyond William, other individuals were also infected by the G virus, one of the earliest being his own daughter. She became trapped in Raccoon City during the outbreak, pursued by both the mutated William and the swarms of zombies and Mr. X. Eventually, she was infected, but was saved thanks to the aid of rookie officer Leon S. Kennedy and survivor Claire Redfield, who procured the vaccine known as Devil. This vaccine prevented Sherry's complete transformation and spared her father's fate. Nevertheless, some G virus remnants stayed in her cells, granting her permanent regenerative abilities. Years later, Sherry joined the United States government's war on bioterrorism, at which point her G-tinged biology became crucial for examining new viruses, including the eventual C virus. Curtis Miller. Though perhaps not as familiar as William and Sherry Birkin, Curtis Miller serves as a striking example of the G virus's tenacity. He appeared in the film Resident Evil, Degeneration, and lost his family when Raccoon City was obliterated. Consumed by rage and grief, and furious about the government's cover-ups, he was manipulated into unleashing a fresh outbreak. Curtis injected himself with the G virus to expose what he believed was rampant corruption. Tragically, like Birkin, he fell victim to violent mutations, sacrificing his humanity for a cause he could not complete. His transformation at a research facility resulted in multiple deaths, and was finally contained through a joint effort by Leon S. Kennedy, Claire Redfield, and Angela Miller. Ben Bertolucci was a fearless investigative journalist, renowned for risking his life to uncover corruption. In the summer of 1998, he began investigating Umbrella and the mysterious murders in the Arklay Mountains. When he uncovered evidence implicating Police Chief Brian Irons had him thrown into jail to silence him. Ben ended up locked away in the Raccoon City police station while the T-virus ravaged the city. His death varies according to the game. One account indicates that William Birkin forcibly implanted him with a G embryo, causing the parasite to tear him apart from within. Other accounts assert that he was simply killed by Birkin's mutated claws, whilst the latest version in the Resident Evil 2 remake shows he was killed by Mr. X. Whichever version holds, Ben died without fully revealing Irons' complicity, though he left enough evidence to implicate the corrupt police chief and Umbrella. Finally, Police Chief Brian Irons, who rose to prominence within the Raccoon City Police Department, was heavily embroiled in Umbrella's cover-ups. When the virus outbreak spiraled out of control in September 1998, Irons suffered a mental collapse, resorting to murder and paranoia as he attempted to conceal Umbrella's involvement. Eventually, he encountered Birkin, who had mutated into a monstrous G form. Reports differ regarding his demise. In one, he is ripped apart by Birkin, whilst another claims he was implanted with a G embryo. Beyond these leading figures, other G virus infections appear in assorted supplementary material. G zombies, for instance, are human corpses reanimated by G rather than T. Although they are not exactly akin to G creatures, their flesh takes on a distinctive pinkish shade, and they remain exceedingly aggressive. There is also the case of Monica, a researcher at Nest who stole a G larva in a desperate attempt to smuggle it out of the facility. The embryo ultimately rejected her from within, bursting out of her body and causing a ghastly end. What truly sets the G virus apart from its cousin, the T virus, is its regenerative prowess and its seemingly limitless potential for mutation. While T tends to kill its host, leading to necrosis and reanimation in zombie form, G strives to preserve the host by rewriting its genetic code, prompting enormous cellular growth and even fully reviving corpses. People infected with G often develop extra limbs, new organs, and tumor-like masses sprouting fully functional eyes, usually on the shoulders or the back, serving as vital weak spots. Being so invasive, G can remodel the entire body and cause catastrophic changes that obliterate human reason and identity. One frightening characteristic is the reproductive impulse shown by individuals infected with the G virus, as they seek genetically compatible humans or close relatives to implant with a G embryo. If the embryo merges successfully, the new host may become a G human, furthering the evolutionary line. However, if genetic compatibility or other conditions fail, the body rejects the embryo with fatal violence, killing the individual. At the same time, the G virus's mutations are closely tied to its vast healing power. If an infected organism sustains grave injuries, the virus triggers yet more mutations to adapt, effectively enhancing the creature to ensure survival. Birkin, for example, underwent 5 recognized mutation phases, each more monstrous than the last. In its final transformation, he amounted to little more than a pulsating mass of teeth, eyes, and tentacles, a living embodiment of Golgotha's endless fixation on boundless growth. This regeneration is at once G's greatest benefit and its worst curse, trapping hosts in a cycle of enforced adaptation that erases all rational thought in any human element. When Raccoon City was annihilated by a catastrophic bombing authorized by the United States government, ostensibly to prevent further T-virus spread, the G-virus endured regardless. Hunk, a member of Umbrella's security service, managed to flee the city with a G sample. Others, such as Ada Wong, are believed to have acquired traces of the virus too. Before long, the US government placed Sherry Birkin under its protection, exploiting her G-altered physiology for their own research. Umbrella Europe is known to have attempted combining the G and T viruses, creating a T plus G variant. Certain individuals, like Dr. Morpheus Duval, sought to weaponize these strains for terrorist ends. Through figures like Derek C. Simmons and the secretive group known as the Family, the US government also collected G cells from Sherry's body, thereby creating the C virus. This strain utilized G's regenerative attributes alongside traits from the T Veronica virus. Hence, the G virus guided the development of subsequent bioorganic weapon programs, sparking large-scale conflicts in locations such as Edonia in China, culminating in major bioterrorist emergencies. Even when newer pathogens have taken center stage, G remains the archetype of unrelenting mutation. One could argue that, overshadowed though it may be, the G virus continued serving as the conceptual basis for future horrors in the Resident Evil universe. Though the G virus seldom commands the same prominence as the T virus, it has left a profound imprint on the saga. It was the direct trigger for the ultimate downfall of Raccoon City, for the T outbreak intensified when Birkin clashed violently with Umbrella's troops. It also marked Sherry for life, dragging her into a nightmare and forcing her into ongoing state supervision. Additionally, it stoked the ambitions of rogue scientists and terrorists who believed they could tame it. Each subsequent outbreak, whether the turmoil at Harvardville Airport or the large-scale crises in China, can be traced back to that same initial spark. For figures like Leon S. Kennedy, Claire Redfield, or Ada Wong, the G virus served as a catalyst, hurling them into prolonged battles against bioterrorism. Leon, for instance, witnessed firsthand how these viruses can dismantle ordinary life and compel the authorities towards desperate and often immoral solutions. Claire, meanwhile, joined TerraSave, devoting herself to assisting victims of such outbreaks, shaped by her encounter with Sherry and the Birkin family in 1998. Meanwhile, Ada Wong continues to pursue her objectives from the shadows, often seeking to acquire samples and research tied to these viruses, including G. Consequently, G altered not only the world at large, but the personal trajectories of the franchise's characters in a profound and permanent way. It is crucial to recall that amid so much horror, Nest's brilliant minds managed to devise a partial antidote: the Devil vaccine. Although it could not reverse advanced G virus mutations, it could halt progression if administered in time, preventing the final transformation. Even then, surgery remained necessary to remove G-infected cells. Just as happened with Sherry, since if any G cells remain in the body, the virus continues replicating. Beyond that, without nests cutting-edge facilities, producing large quantities of devil is difficult. Such production demands biosafety level 4 laboratories and highly specialized techniques. Given the complexity of creating a large-scale treatment, the most reliable strategy for containing the G virus remains the traditional one: quarantine, containment, and complete eradication of the infected. The BSAA was founded precisely for that purpose, to neutralize bioorganic threats across the globe. Nevertheless, even they prioritize the immediate destruction of any potential G outbreak, issuing top-level alerts wherever G is suspected to appear. Taking all this into account, the G virus is much more than just a narrative device. It encapsulates the grand themes of Resident Evil: human arrogance, horror, and the unavoidable repercussions of toying with life. Its creation echoed the hubris of Umbrella scientists, who believed they could shape evolution at their whim. From a storytelling viewpoint, Genie stands out not merely for its grotesque mutations, but for the intensely personal consequences it entails. Birkin was a father, a husband, and a brilliant mind consumed by jealousy and desperation. Sherry's suffering added a humane perspective to the saga's horror. In subsequent tales, the imprint of the G virus is felt whenever a new virus arises, though future antagonists introduced other terrifying variants. Golgotha's shadow looms over the entire franchise. And that brings us to the end of today's exploration. Thank you so much for joining me for this detailed analysis of the horrors and conspiracies surrounding the G virus in Resident Evil. Now I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think that if William Birkin had survived longer, the G virus would have evolved to even more extreme levels? Or might his own unbridled mutation have finished him off? Share your theories in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, do give me a like and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Hey, don't go just yet. If you enjoyed my video, I'd love to recommend another one for you to watch.